Good morning, everybody. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Tom McGinn to do grand rounds this morning. Many of us in the room know Dr. McGinn. Dr. McGinn is, as you can see, he's the Deputy Physician-in-Chief and Senior Vice President at Northwell Health, where he is also the Department Chair, and he's the David Green Professor of Medicine in the Department of Medicine at Hofstra School of Medicine. Dr. McGinn got his medical degree from my alma mater.
Harvard of Brooklyn?
Yes. Did his residency at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and some New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation Hospital.
Some small area, Jacoby, some small little community hospital.
Yeah. And then at some point he went on to be an educator and leader of education at Montefiore, where many of us got to know him before he came over here to work in the Division of General Internal Medicine, eventually becoming division chief before he, after years of really helping to develop this as a strong research and educational group and clinical operation, moving on to Northwell, where he has done great work. Several of us in the room, Juan and I in particular, if I may be so bold, have had Tom as a mentor and colleague and friend over all these years, and learned a great deal from his expertise in evidence-based medicine, which he has applied to his clinical care and education and research, for which he's had done a lot of important interventional work that has been well received in high-tier journals, published in high-tier journals. Among his various honors is he has been appointed as a fellow in the, what is it, Irish.
Wow, very good. I don't know why that comes to honestly my bio. I don't know why it's there.
Well, because you're
it's a Royal College.
Royal College or something. Yes. And I'll just finish up by a little tidbit. Tom has always had this way of turning unexpected opportunities into gold, and I think one great one was when he took a physician of veterinary medicine from Ireland and got him to do human epidemiological research here with us for a year.
Cat ownership among asthmatics in Harlem. So that was good.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's actually a funny story. We're on the phone and he's Martin Downs, who I'm still very close with. He's on the phone with us and we're like chatting, and I'm like, somewhere, we all set it up. He's going to move here. He's going to do a research fellowship, and somewhere along the lines, I don't know, it was Alex or somebody said, "By the way, are you a doctor?" And they're like, he's like, "Well, I am, sort of. I'm a veterinarian, large animal veterinarian." I'm like, "You're coming to Harlem to do research? Like, what are you doing?" So, I was like, "Well, whatever." He got he's publishing still quite a bit on epidemiology of pet ownership and healthcare. It's actually an interesting topic. Anyway, it's, I feel like I'm home and seeing all my good friends, and it's amazing. We go back to Montefiore and roaming the halls of residency and Jerry Passion, and seeing some fun to be here. So, see the Hep C program up and running, and still saving lives. It's amazing, really. You guys have done great work, so it's an honor to be here. Juan and I chatted a little bit, and I was like, could I do my research? My research is in prediction modeling and integrating into the electronic health record to try to get reduction in unnecessary care, really. And Juan was like, no, that's not interesting. I don't want to talk about that. That's where I'm still NIH funded and do research in that space. But one thing that's happened as I've moved up the administrative ranks, I kind of feel like something of an anthropologist as I look at health systems. And as a visiting professor over the last couple of years, I've been to about 6 or 7 major universities, and many of the folks there are chairs of medicine, and they often ask me, because Northwell is kind of seen as this young superpower that's figured out how to build a big system rapidly. And that's nationally, I think, it has that reputation. People say, well, how do you guys do this? What's the secret sauce of what's happening? So after being in Michigan and Tufts and Duke and Cincinnati and all these places, I eventually just put talks together about thinking about what's happening in the United States. So Juan said, hey, that sounds much more interesting than your boring research on multivariate analysis and decision support, which I agree with 100%. So I'll go through this quick, but this is such a small group, we should just chit chat about it, and actually Mount Sinai stars in this a little bit. So, and we'll this the first slide to me I think is probably I think one of the most important elements of when I think about what's happening. What I'm talking about is the conversion of an academic health center, which we all lived through when we were here at Sinai. Actually, I was 12 years here at Sinai. The last 8 or so years as division chief. But also, people don't realize the last 3 years I was here, in addition to being division chief, I was the vice president for alliance development, which meant that Sinai was going to build a network. They didn't have one, okay? And Ken Davis asked me if I would help him drive. Literally, I sat in the car with Ken Davis and, oh, by the way, all he listens to is WFAN sports news all day. And he literally didn't want to talk to me the whole time he drove. Which is fine. We would drive, to Morristown, New Jersey, and talk to Atlantic Health. It was the beginning of developing this system. So what you see, this is across the United States, the academic health centers have been converting to academic health systems, okay? Now and this is really cool animation you're going to see here. That was pretty good, right? You see how I did that? It's sophisticated. And I think this is an interesting challenge, is that as an academic center becomes a system, relative to, just think about it from a financial standpoint, the budget allocated towards academics on a relative scale shrinks, right? I'm not saying it may not spend anything less than it used to spend, but relative as the growth of the institution and the system gets bigger, academics get smaller, relatively speaking. And I think that plays itself out in the whole place, right? The attention span for academics is a little more distracted. And the C-suite, what we call the C-suite, which would be the CEO, the dean, the president, instead of just having an academic hospital, which really is, all about education, research, and patient care, now they have to worry about, delivery systems. And also, I said in the C-suite, the conversation has nothing to do with academics. Zero. I can tell you right now. They're investing billions of dollars that they have days on cash. These are all things they have to do to survive, but it's just a fact. So those of you who don't know, Northwell, which is where I am, is on Long Island based, but also all over. It's in Westchester now. It's in Staten Island. We have 25 hospitals, 800 ambulatory sites. Northwell is the opposite of what Sinai and Michigan are. We are a tertiary community hospital that grew a health system and is now getting academic, versus an academic health center that's growing a system. It's a little bit different, and I think the dynamics play out. This just gives you a map of where we are. They always show this Australia thing. I don't know what that is, but and Karolinska's. We do work with Karolinska's too, actually. So I guess I can show that. This is the number of employed physicians. If you just look what we've done, 2015 to 2018, we've gone from these are the number of ambulatory locations, and this is the number of doctors. And Sinai could probably show something similar. Everybody's doing this. This is not like we're special, but we're probably a little bit bigger. And we cover everything: clinical care, education. We have research, bioelectronic medicine. I oversee an outcomes center. And again, I think almost every health system could show something like that. So one of the questions, and we can talk about this, is why the hell is this all going on? Like, what is this all about? I look at these 5 issues. There's a lot more, but I kind of drill down to consolidation of the market, intense competition. I would say complexity, and the complexity is really about contracting and payer mix and trend gap, which is something most academics don't understand, but I think it's something you really need to understand, and we'll talk about that for a second. And this push towards value. So let's talk about consolidation, and I'm going to go through this quick. no big secret. You have large nonprofits and large for-profit health systems that are just blossoming. Some people say in about 10 to 15 years, we may only have 10 health systems in the United States. If it keeps going to the end, the relationships between systems is going to become much more important than the creation of a system. I think we're at a point in our evolution now where what is the relationship between sort of, the Mid-Atlantic region with the Northeast region versus who owns 86th and Madison, which is that conversation. This is just, I'm going to run through these quickly. This is, CHS. This is Tenet Health, 69 hospitals scattered throughout. This is LifePoint. These are all the for-profits. Now we're into the non-for-profits tend to be doing much better recently. And this is Trinity Health, which is probably over 100 hospitals now. Catholic Health, CHI, which you may hear the word CHI quite a bit. And CHI and Dignity, they merged to create the largest health system in the United States very recently, 2017. And this other thing is happening, right? Where these bizarre combinations of pharmacies with insurance companies. Who knew CVS could buy an insurance company? I thought CVS was like a pharmacy. But it's a mega company that does drug distribution across the world and purchased an insurance company. You got to get your head around that. Why would they do that? Well, there's some complex relationships that they're trying to drive. And Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, and JP Morgan combined to try to pull together some insurance, how to do healthcare right. Of course, they hired Atul Gawande, who's a surgeon and writes for the New Yorker, to be their CMO, which I could forget what that's about. But so this is an interesting thing to think about here. So United Healthcare paid $5 billion for DaVita Medical Group. Does anybody know the arm of United Healthcare that United Health has two big companies, the insurance company and, does anyone know what the other one is? So Optum, have you heard of the word Optum? Optum is probably the most important healthcare system in the world right now, but people don't even know it exists. That's what's fascinating. They have $50 billion to spend on purchasing physician practices. They bought Westchester Medical Group, they bought a bunch of Long Island medical groups, they bought hospitals in Brazil, they're roaming around and buying up things, and they are an arm of United Healthcare. Okay, they paid $5 billion. Try to get your head around this. I'm just going to show you the complexity of the landscape. DaVita, everybody know what DaVita is? They're a for-profit dialysis. There's two major for-profit dialysis groups in the United States. They own 98% of the dialysis market in the whole United States. DaVita is in a joint venture partnership with us to run dialysis on Long Island. We have about 12 sites with them. DaVita tried to buy some primary care groups down in Florida. They thought they'd mix up their market, and it failed terribly. They sold that medical group to Optum. Okay? Now, Optum probably does your billing here, by the way. That's the other thing they do. And they are buying up medical groups who compete with you while they do their billing. The whole relationships are crazy when you start looking. We have a joint venture with DaVita. They have primary care practices they're building. And the whole marketplace is getting insane.
Does antitrust come into play?
Yes, all the time. Yeah. And right now, most of the antitrust issues are with Sinai and the systems that are very geographically. Because what someone like Optum is buying one practice on Long Island, one on Westchester, has a bunch in California, but they haven't tried to own a marketplace just yet. We competed with Mount Sinai to get South Nassau Community Hospital. The reason South Nassau decided not to go with us was because they were concerned for antitrust, and that means they'd have to spend millions of dollars on antitrust legal fees. And so that plays itself out in the local market quite a bit. Intense competition. So this talk I gave in Michigan recently, and the Hardwick Command had me out, and so we had a good time. And I always have to tell them, what's Long Island, And what I usually just say is it's an island that's really long. And it is, by the way. We own, properties from here. That's a 3-hour, for me to go visit some of my primary care docs, that's like a 3-hour. Might as well be in Idaho. Now NYU, Mount Sinai, and Northwell are so intensely competing in Long Island. It's insane. It is just so competitive. So I'm like, well, why the heck why does everybody want this beachfront? Like, what the hell's going on here? And of course, Nassau County is ranked first, and Suffolk County is third in median incomes in New York State. So that's why everybody's there, okay? It's the number 1, it's the number 2, it's the number 3, it's the number 4. It is the only reason Mount Sinai, Northwell, and NYU are there, because there's money. That's it, okay? They're just there because there's a lot of money there, which means people are well insured. You talk about strategy and all that other stuff. It's all about payer mix. That's all that counts. You know, people don't realize Nassau County is bigger than like a lot of states. You know, it is a large entity of very wealthy people. In Suffolk County, you know, Suffolk County is really long. It's big and more spread out. So, but do you guys know that you have Huntington Medical Group? That's I think now called what it is. In the middle of like, it's been there forever. And this I think is because Ken Davis I think grew up in Huntington, so he decided to get a medical group there 20 years ago. So NYU, Mount Sinai, and Northwell have medical groups in this little town, like in the middle of nowhere, but it's very wealthy and has great insurance payer mix. So when you look at the landscape in New York, it's Northwell, which you know we are the largest and you know the best looking and most intelligent. And then you know you have obviously NYU, New York Presby. New York Presby tends to be in the Westchester area, competing with Montefiore. They don't really come out from Long Island. You know, obviously Mount Sinai. The Catholic health system of Long Island is you know very competitive. And Stony Brook, for a state institution, does pretty well in terms of growing the network. You know, and each one of these dots are a different competitive color that's scattered through ambulatory sites throughout Long Island. And you can map out street corners, and you know, NYU opens up over here, Sinai opens up over here, Northwell opens up over there. It's insanity. People know that there are 2 hospitals next to North Shore University Hospital. One is Winthrop, one is South Nassau. NYU came in and took over. You know, it's now NYU Winthrop Hospital, which is a pretty big tertiary, and they're starting a medical school there. And you guys came in and did South Nassau Hospital, which is just, so we are now covered. Now we can't say anything, we can't complain, like what are you guys doing coming to Long Island? Because, you know, we did Lenox Hill and we did West Village, and probably we were the first group of hospitals to be aggressive like that. And it only makes sense that, so, you know, now you have South Nassau Hospital, it's Mount Sinai Hospital down there. So the other thing, if you look at, as I said to you, these groups, ProHealth is a large medical group on Long Island and WestMed. All of these, if you look at this consolidated with WestMed in Westchester, these big 3 groups converted to Northwell. These 2 groups converted, and these 2 groups converted, merged together. And they became Optum, which is part of United Healthcare, Northwell Health, Montefiore, Mount Sinai. So those groups all consolidated under one umbrella now. So you have this sort of consolidation on the ambulatory side. And you know, just to get into this now, if you look around the landscape, we are now looking into Philadelphia, Maryland, and looking up into Boston, as is Sinai and NYU. And you're going to see this regionalization of some of these things. I think is where, you know, so when we hire people to come work in the New York landscape, so it's so unusually competitive, we have a training tape that we show them, and I don't really have time to show you the whole tape, but it was directed, shockingly, by Martin Scorsese. And you know, it's called The Gang of this is actually me. I'm the big Irish guy in the corner over here. So it literally is street fight. I mean, when I was here, I did it for 3 years in the business development suite, and I was, you know, at Northwell, and kind of as an anthropologist, you're like, what is going on? I think I'm actually So, you know, so you think, okay, this is just kind of happening in competitive, crazy New York. Now, I was out to Michigan and giving grand rounds there, so I thought, let me do a little research. So I looked up what's going on out there. Sure enough, Michigan, you know, is a big health system. It's got 3 hospitals. It used to just be purchased 2 hospitals. And on their website, you know, they have all the advantage and the growth that they're doing, and they're going up and down. Michigan, look at this is on their website. They're building. They never had any of this. All the way spreading out throughout Michigan. They're competing in space that they never did before. Most of the major academic centers, like Columbia and Michigan, and I'd say Sinai to some extent, were under the belief that they didn't need to do this. Their reputations would drive the business. But then suddenly, groups like Northwell showed up and started gobbling up the marketplace, so the bigger academic centers are a little bit later to the game to figure out that we better own the network. If we don't own our delivery network, we're not going to get cases into our hospitals. At the end of the day, it's about payer mix and driving business into your hospital. I mean, I'm just giving you by the way, everything I'm saying is not like I'm advocating for it, because I did this talk before people get mad at me. Like, this is not like me advocating for this. I'm just telling you this is what's going on, okay? So don't rage against the man here. It's not like I didn't create this. I'm not advocating for this. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing in the world that we need to have for healthcare, but this is just what's happening. Actually, I think academic general medicine, I should have probably given the one talk I've done at some of the GIM meetings, is where does general medicine fit in all this? And I think it sits squarely in the middle of it, and it's extremely important. Yeah.
How, in all of this growth, how are systems balancing the evolution of value-based care in the
So I'm gonna come to that. I'm gonna talk about that. So this just back to Michigan. Again, my point on this is I did this I was visiting professor down at Wake Forest. Gary has me down. Crazy to go, quiet little old sleepy North Carolina. Oh my God, it's the bloodbath. I mean, Duke and UNC, and then they have this new big system, which is sort of a Northwell-like thing, called the Carolina system, which is bigger than all they're put together. And Wake Forest is the little kid between Duke and UNC, and they wake up every day and they're like, oh my God, they just took over this practice site across the street from us. They're going to take all our orthopedic business and shift it over here. That's the craziness that's going on. And same thing I called this actually the Game of Thrones because I thought it was a little colder in Michigan. I thought, gangs of New York, I thought it was I was being culturally sensitive. And this is just about that. So complexity, I think, this will get a little bit into what you're talking about. So I think when I talk about complexity, I'm talking about structural complexity. Now when I go to these places, every health system has no clue how to structure themselves. What's a department? What's a service line? Who runs this? Who owns that? Is the chief at Mount Sinai Hospital in charge of Roosevelt Hospital? Is the division chief under, Barbara Murphy in charge of diabetes at Roosevelt, or do they report to the CMO at Roosevelt? Is Juan in charge of primary care across the entire health system? If not, what's his responsibility for primary care down in Long Island? Everybody's like, I don't know. Literally everybody has a different solution for this. And a lot of what I think is going on is this sort of vertical horizontal confusion too, because as you build health systems like this, you build out larger ambulatory platforms that are mostly primary care, but most of the people building these things are vertically oriented hospital-based people, and they don't understand some of the primary, and there's an inherent tension between these two worlds. The vertical people want the ambulatory network just to feed their surgical business. That's all they care about. The horizontally oriented people like us, we're like, okay, we want to do primary care and give flu shots, but it's a little bit challenging. Okay, I'm going to ask a question. You have to tell me the truth, don't lie. Which line is bigger, the vertical or the horizontal? Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Just tell me what you see. The vertical is bigger. I didn't know this exists, actually. I did a lot of research, Googled it, and they're the same size. I didn't know there's an actual thing called the vertical horizontal illusion. Pretty cool, right? Or maybe not that cool. I thought it was cool. And right now at Northwell, for example, the ambulatory footprint is almost as big in terms of its finances as the vertical footprint, but the amount of time, effort, and energy put into the vertical situation outweighs it by 100 to 1. And if you ask me what was the most important thing you need to do if you're going to be in this business, is to have the best integrated primary care network that you can imagine to survive. But yet they all think like hospitals, because that's where everything was born out of a tertiary hospital. So there is some confusion. We're in a service line structure, and I don't want to get too far into this, but I was head of the medicine service line, everything medicine had to report up to me, whether it was Lenox Hill Hospital or Westchester Hospital. And there were some reasons for that because there was a lot of internal competition, there was some waste going on. I'm not saying it's the right way to structure things, but that's the way we did it. So we have department chairs, we have divisions that are academic and community-based, we have hospital executives, you have community-based practices, you have hospitals, intensivists, endoscopy. So how do these things all relate to each other in a big, complicated health system is a question. This is how we do it, and this looks insane, but believe it or not, it works. So the chair, I'll give you an example. The chair at Lenox Hill Hospital has 12 divisions, right? And 10 community practices surrounding Lenox Hill Hospital. They all kind of report up like you would think a traditional chair would do, right? However, we have a service line that the community practices have to report up to, right? I don't know if this sounds familiar to you guys. And then you have a senior vice president and executive director within the hospital and the service lines that these people have to report to. And an executive director at Lenox Hill Hospital they have to report to, who has an executive regional director, and you have a COO and a dean. Sounds like a nightmare. But you know what, it actually works. I'm not going to, whatever it is, you have to have a structure where there's what I call vertical and horizontal integration and potentially even conflict so that people can talk to each other. And believe it or not, if the personalities aren't too borderline, you know, this can work, but it's complicated, to say the least. All right, payer mix and trend gap.
Actually, just to go back to that slide,
Yeah.
what are the different metrics that are being judged by each of the
Well, you know, so each service line, so we have, well, we basically, if you, at the end of the day, what it comes down to right now is we have a vertical service line structure that integrates with horizontal executive regional directors, who really are hospital. They basically are the chief medical officers for all those hospitals. And the service lines set the metrics for each department. They're really departments, we call them service lines, but they're basically big departments. And, you know, for primary care, for general medicine, it's what you guys do. You know, I did it here, it's RVUs, there might be base salaries with some, you know, quality component to it. The hospitalists have no RVU piece, they're mostly all through quality and other things like that. So it varies by each division in each department.
Do you ever get, isn't looking at your structure, do you ever get issues, I know you talked about, you know, one's too borderline, but what happens in university and they have to report to like their division chief, and then they also have to report to their service line chief, and they're not the same person, so it's like mommy said this, but then daddy said that,
Yeah.
and then what do you do there?
You know, I think, you know, our CEO believes in not having a T of O and just thinks life is a matrix and you guys are going to figure out how to do this. And, you know, there are times, the fundamental structures that we have as service line, the biggest tension sometimes is our service line, if the service line leader is not the department chair, then that's where some tension rises. I was both the academic department of medicine chair, so Northwell AJ is the academic department with the research education, and then I was also the service line leader. So I could fight with myself, and I was fine. But when those two things are separately, there's some tension that goes on, and then they got to work it out. And I could give you examples, but I'd be breaching confidentiality. So one thing in the background that you have to think about is this is currently driving a lot of thought processes across the United States, and this is the payer mix concept. So payer mix simply means, if you really want to drill it down, it simply means how many of our patients coming into us have government insurance versus commercial insurance. That's the mix we're talking about. And the reason for that concern is if Medicare is your baseline, right, then you look at a commercial product and say, okay, United Healthcare pays me 2 times Medicare, so it's 2.0. Medicaid pays me 0.8 of Medicare. So if you're in the business, if you're purely in the business and you're going to say Medicare gives me $1, when I see a Medicare patient, I get $1. When I see a United patient, I get $2.50. When I see a Medicaid patient, I get 80 cents. What business are you going to look for, right? And if your profit margin is thin to narrow to nothing, you know, if I shift that, if I say 50% of your patients are government and 50% are commercial, And then just by the fact that people got older and aged off their commercial insurance and went on to Medicare, I didn't do anything. I'm still seeing the same 100 people. Just by the nature of aging, the next year 52% will be on government and 48, and I'll lose X dollars without, I'll do everything exactly the same, right? All that happened was someone just went from United to Medicare government. Right? That was a big concern with the ACA, with quote unquote Obamacare, was that people would jump off highly paying commercial insurance products onto lesser paying government products. And the health systems were like, nothing's going to change here, but I'm going to lose money. That was not the issue of increasing coverage for people that didn't have it. It was shifting the coverage for people who had it. So that was in the background. And what you see now is this aging population that, it's tipping more and more to government payments and less to commercial payment. So every major health system is looking at this very closely. Why do you think NYU, Mount Sinai, Northwell, Cornell, Presbyterian has not built a hospital in East New York and Brooklyn? Right? I can dot everything that Sinai has built and tell you that it's based on commercial insurance density. That's what it goes out to. Opportunity, everyone's doing this, everybody's doing the same thing. And then I sit in the boardroom sometimes and they're like, yeah, these health and hospitals, they don't know how to run a hospital, they're losing money. I'm like, you guys see a patient, you get $3. HHC sees the same patient, they get 80 cents. And you're sitting back thinking, oh God, look at us, we know how to do things, and you don't. It's, if all the 80-cent patients go to one hospital, and then all the commercial patients are going to the other hospital, who's going to have an easier time taking care of those patients? I'm not telling you what the fix is. I'm not promoting this. I'm just saying this issue is a constant.
Are those a real ratio of dollars, or is that an example? Because
those are those are within a ballpark. Those are ballpark.
For ambulatory, I thought it was $1.50 versus $1 rather than $2.50.
You mean
Are you
for?
talking hospital or talking ambulatory? That ratio of 3 to 1 to.
It could be anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 to 2, anywhere in that range.
And that's hospital.
And the reason that you get a higher number is that you're bigger and you have more leverage when you negotiate with the insurance company. So why would a primary care doc want to join a big health system? Because they can only get 1.2% of Medicare, but when they join the big health system, the big health system can negotiate for 3.0 of Medicare. And now I'm doing the same work, I'm getting 3 times the money. Right?
So isn't that why Medicaid has higher rates for hospitals? I
Medicaid,
don't know that it offsets it enough, but.
according to the finance people, not enough. Relative to what you get for commercial. In other words, you'd rather have a commercial patient in the bed than a Medicaid patient. Pure financials.
I mean, in these boardrooms, are there ever discussions about healthcare justice? Kind of
I was waiting for that to come out.
evening out the plane. I'm just sitting here like upset.
No. And this is where I get into trouble because people get angry with me. I got nothing to do with this, guys. I just want to point that. Just keep that in mind. I'm like, they do actually, and I think that I can tell you, like, when our CEO is a social worker, poor background, really, he'll tell you, like, I hate this. But, like, United Healthcare is margin. It's, you know what I mean by margin? Like, when they pay the bills and everything's done, how much profit did they have at the end? It's 20%. So they make billions of dollars of profit. I can tell you Sinai, and this it's complex, but Sinai, Northwell, the margin they make when they pay all the bills is anywhere between 0.5 and 2%. Their error, in other words, that's if they make one mistake and don't do this right, they're losing money. They don't have a cushion. So when I say that there's an old, the Mother Teresa, saying, she said, no margin, no mission. That means if you're going broke and you're not making a little profit, then you can't survive. Then you're not going to be in the business. So the CEOs of nonprofit, I call them nonprofit corporations, I said it very purposefully, use that as the rationale, is that, look, I don't have any flexibility here. Now, we could have a much longer conversation. It's much more complex than that because, so for example, what happens in a nonprofit, they don't want to show big margins because then they get scrutiny. So they may spend money during the year on a new lobby for research over here. It's got a fancy, statue in it, right? But that's a cost to running their system. So when they show the books, they say, look, we only made a little bit of money. Yeah, but you spent all this money. Did you really need to spend the money on this? So that conversation is tricky. I do think most CEOs, I know Ken Davis personally, he's a good person. He's a schizophrenia researcher. I think he wants to do the right thing. Michael Dowling, my CEO, is a social worker, but then again, he has to have a margin. And what happens sometimes is when you don't have CEOs like that, and I worry about some of the CEOs in the large for-profits that don't even hesitate. Right? They don't even they're like, just screw it, margin, we want bigger margins because I got to pay out my shareholders, right? The good news in a nonprofit like Sinai is that all the profits go back into the system and hopefully come to a place like this and help us do a little more better work in Harlem and, serve some communities that don't have what they got.
Tom, do you think the executives in these nonprofits are being paid appropriately?
Oh boy. Oh, we got snapping going on now.
Anything we're getting paid appropriately?
I don't think, Keith, whatever you're making, it's not enough. I guarantee you. Because you have kids and you live in New York. It's an interesting question. Let me get through this and let me come back to that. It's a complicated question because at the end of the day, multi-billion. This company is an $8 billion company, and Northwell's $13 billion. And I do see when I go to other places that don't have the talent to kind of run those places, and the bottom line is that they're going to make, money to do that. I personally think some are overpaid, but I don't think that's the problem. I think frankly, that's a distraction. I think the bigger problem is our surgical colleagues are overpaid and it's overdriven. Our health systems are still completely value-based. I'm sorry, I'm not going to insult anybody working in the value-based sector right now. It's minimal. On the $13 billion business that we have at Northwell, it's I don't know, 200 million? Do the math. It's very small. Maybe here it's a little more, but at the end of the day, it's about surgical volume. And surgeons get paid a lot of money because they get a lot of surgical volume, and the margin that the health system drives are all through surgery. That's what's wacky to me, right? It still hasn't changed. On the East Coast of this country, fee-for-service surgery is still the biggest driver of everything. And we pay surgeons millions of dollars because they drive millions of dollars and do surgery. Anyway, this just shows you that, and I'm going to quickly run through this, but the one thing I want to show you is that this is called the trend gap. That means if you, like I just said, if you sat still and people just became more older and joined Medicare, you're going to have the commercial insurance always subsidizes. In the minds of a CEO, commercial insurance is there to subsidize the government insurance, right? I lose 20 cents for every procedure I do with Medicaid, but I make a buck on every patient I see with United. They look at this, and this is our math by my CFO. 1% shift from commercial to government insurance leads to a $40 million reduction in revenue. So you take that example I said where these X number of people just get older. If I don't do anything to correct, this is called the natural trend gap. If I stand still, I'm going to lose $40 million. Let's say you're working at the top of your line, you're efficient, you're seeing patients, you're billing, coding, everything's going perfect. You're going to lose $40 million because of the nature. That's called the trend gap. It's a trend. It's just working its way right through. And then the other thing they put into trend gaps is benefits go up or cost of something goes up. Those are things that just happen without you even working on it. So this all drives everybody to fight tooth and nail for commercial patients. And this is, something we can talk about. And the other thing that it's done is get people into other businesses than caring for patients. So what we, I don't want to get into this, but we now have like 50 companies that we're now investing in and trying to build. It's called the alternate revenue stream. You guys are doing, actually Sinai does this better than a lot of people. You start up small little companies, think tanks that growing out new devices and, insurance products. You can do a lot of different things. All right, really quick, I'm just going to go through this because the push towards value, okay? My comments on this, I have too much information in here, but I do think, for me, we all need to be 100% value-based. Now, currently what value-based care means, for the most part, if it's not completely capitated, it's really fee-for-service with a penalty. So, people can debate me on this one, but I think, for example, most insurance companies will say, I used to give you $1 for what you did. Now I'm going to give you 80 cents, and then prove to me you did a good job, and I'll give you the other 20 cents. That's really fee-for-service with a penalty, and you never get the 20 cents back, right? You never get it back. You'll when you average it out over millions of patients, you're going to lose money because just bureaucracy and documentation and HCC scores and all this crazy crap we're doing. But at the end of the day, the challenge for me as we go forward and looking at value-based care is the older patient. To me, they're the quintessential challenge for complex health system. We have a complex patient. And if this is a case that I saw, and I always talk about Mr. Smith, and everybody drives me nuts when I talk about it, but I do it all the time. 79-year-old, mild hypertension, osteoarthritis, hypercholesterolemia, BPH, 5 days in the hospital, catheter procedure, in the hospital, had new medications added, and had recent visits to his rheumatologist, urologist, and some new medications, and he's seeing you here in I of A. And this happened somewhere in some Long Island hospital, right? All of this information you got. This is all you got. Don't ask me anything more, okay? He's coming to see you. He was in the hospital for 5 days. He had a little chest pain, some catheter procedure done, right? He had something added, new medications, and after discharge from the hospital, he happened to see his rheumatologist, urologist. Now you're sitting there seeing this guy. Does this ever happen to anybody? Okay, this happens to me all the time. And what really, so, this guy had 4 new medications added when he was seen by this general internist who didn't know what the hell was going on. He had the most important one stopped because he had a cardiac cath and the angioplasty and the plavix was inadvertent. He stopped it. He was confused. But he had 4 new medications, some of which he didn't need. Some of them were redundant. He had 4 appointments made with 2 different cardiologists, actually. Because he had one prior to his admission, and they gave him another one upon discharge. Right? That happens all the time. While at the general internist, they did 5 additional unnecessary tests. Because he was a little dizzy. He was feeling a little dizzy. So they did a bunch of things. What happened in the end, he ended up back in the ER again with chest pain, had another cath, more diload, ended up with renal failure, and got sent into the ICU, right? Because the Plavix wasn't continued. The one drug you probably really needed to keep on that whole time. And, if we can't manage this challenge, we still don't do a good job. You can show me all your net. We have a bunch of programs. You guys have a bunch of programs. This is our transitional care program. We call people when they get discharged. We do a lot of crazy bells and whistles. We have nurse navigators. The bottom line is this is still happening rampantly everywhere, and we're not doing a good job of it. And the reason I think is that I love this slide. This was the slide they showed me when I showed up at Northwell. This was our CEO firmly believes we need to go from fee-for-service into value-based care. And I said to him, this is health reform. This was Obamacare was coming out. I said, first of all, this guy's going to hit this thing and die. So this is not a good. You got to get another guy because this guy's not going to make it. It's just not happening. I mean, I don't know where the hell he's going with this job. Think about that. I mean, really? That's how you're going to cross the chasm? You're going to just go flopping into this. I don't know what's down there. Maybe hopefully it's a river that's deep. But I like this one better. Okay. This looks like it might make it, although I still think he's probably going to hit the edge and fall down. What I see going on, and I see this, wherever I go, this is my symbol. Now you have to turn that. Can you turn that light out, John? Right behind you. You have to look. This is I spent a lot of time on this, by the way. So I wanted to it took me a long time to find this slide.
That's yours.
Okay. All right. So to me, this is the gap from fee-for-service to value, right? It's a very complex slide. I hope you'll pay attention with me. This is academic health centers, okay? And this is the hospital surgical ORs that are weighing them down. And they're looking at the gap and they're saying, I'm not going for that gap. I'm a snail, I'm not moving. I can't. You think I'm gonna go to that gap? You're nuts. I'm gonna fight tooth and nail to cross that gap. Okay? So, not to be pessimistic, we're, right now, I don't know, you can turn the lights back on. I don't know what Sinai's numbers are in terms of relative to their total revenue, how much comes in through value or full cap. Is anybody in the room that knows this?
You're getting 60-40 value, but
Value.
Across the system.
Across the entire,
no population,
no.
not in number
Money,
of patients.
money.
Money.
How much comes in? Anyway, it's moving slow. California, whole other story, which is interesting. It's really like two universes that we live in this country. So really, just wrap it up really quick. So the academic health system has a lot of pressure. You have provider expansion and consolidation. So it's almost like, well, Northwell expanded, so Sinai's got to expand. Sinai's expanding, so Columbia Presbyterian's got to expand. Go down the line. And actually, insurance consolidation is really the countervailing force. Like the insurance companies consolidate, so then the provider has to consolidate because it's all about leverage. When you sit across the table from the commercial insurance company, they have to be scared that you might not, participate. And if you don't participate, they got all their patients, their customers are going to be angry. And the only way they get really angry is that you're everywhere, and you're big, and you're high quality. So obviously, payer mix is a problem, intense competition, complex contracting with all the value-based contracting, and the complexity of our growth and our systems and our are we chairs, are we chiefs, are we service lines? All of these things are kind of pushing on it. And if you look at what's happened around here, from 1965 to about 1988, it was all about the building, right? When I was in residency, I didn't know there was no system. I mean, it was like the building, right? We didn't have to do anything. Life was very simple. Then, some pressure started to push on it, and these things started to grow, and it became about the network. My last 3 years at Sinai, I saw the beginning of the network. I remember there was you guys don't know Wayne Keithley, and he was sitting in a room, and it was like business development was 3 people. I think it must be like 300 people now. And I was the only doctor in the room. It became a little more about the network. Now it's all about integration in doctors, right? Building a broad network with, so this was hospital acquisition, now it's doctor acquisition, and then it's all about the customer. 2018 going forward, I think in New York in particular, the systems are pretty much about as big as they're going to get. And now it's about tying the knots closer together so that you don't leak and send patients to the wrong place and fortify take your troops, make sure they're all working together. Right now you got a bunch of different armies that you've purchased over the last 10 years and they don't know how to work together. And slowly you're going to make them work together and train together and share patients and do all that. And then if you have these 5 big health systems in New York and they're all kind of integrated now and starting to work well together, then the only thing you're going to win on is convincing patients. Like, you got to just fight over the patients. And what does that mean? That means like the patient experience. That means the quality and things along those lines. And the way I think about it going forward, the big question now is, I think frankly, how you get into the digital space over the next 10 years. If you're this big integrated network with a lot of primary care, if you're not really doing a great job in the digital space, then you're going to also, that's where patients are now. And in 10 years, most patients are going to be living on making scheduled appointments, checking their labs, doing their billing. Virtual care is going to be, we have 60 urgent care centers, and now we just launched virtual urgent care, which is, people are soaking it up. It's the way I look at that. My whole vision of that whole thing was, we did a lot of work with strep. A lot of my work is on inappropriate antibiotic prescribing. So I look at, Mr. Smith used to sit in bed with a cold and a cough, and the thought, it was a little chilly out, the thought of going to see a doctor was like, I'll just have my, chicken soup with matzo balls, something, I'll have soup and I'll sit here and I'll get over it. But then, and an urgent care center opened up down the block. He could actually see it out his window. He's like, maybe I'll walk in, I'll go to my urgent care center because whatever, it's convenient. And then, he goes, he gets inappropriate x-rays and antibiotics and all the things he doesn't need. Now, before he just sat in bed, he had chicken soup and everything was good. Now he goes and gets antibiotics and he ends up with C. diff and the whole thing. Now, he's sitting in bed and he sees the urgent care center out the window, but now he's got an app. He can call in and talk to somebody. And I'm not making this up, something that delivers the antibiotic to his house, right? So now he's got a bed sore, C. diff. And that's, you think I'm joking, it's going to happen. But I do think, who wins in this digital space in the next 5 years is going to be interesting. We're building out a whole big digital platform. I'm not going to get into it, a whole digital platform. It's sort of the next battleground to me. I'm going to end with this, and that I think competitive marketplace, fee-for-service, value-based contracts, all that aside, all this craziness, people that win today are, I think, good, solid PCMH models that have integrated care with good data, behavioral sciences, because that's where the competition, like patients who come into a good functioning patient-centered medical home, they're going to love it, and they're going to stay there, and that means you increase your market share. I really believe that patient-centered medical home or neighborhood is really great whether you're in a volume-based business or a value-based business. When you have an intensely competitive marketplace, how you run your ship is now the most important thing. What that patient experience is when they walk in is what's going to make them happy. And that's good. To me, that's great because that's what I want to do. I want to give high-quality integrated healthcare. And I've sort of convinced the C-suite that this is really where we have to spend our money, is on PCMH models. And we have about 60 of them. And you guys have a bunch, and we're all building these. But anyway, the new model to me with this guy would be, wherever he gets admitted, doesn't matter whether it's a competitive hospital or not, the nurse practitioner calls that patient after discharge and checks on them, no matter what their insurance is. We're all doing pieces of this. And then, there's a pre-visit huddle, no matter who the patient is. Everything is looked over. Many of us do pieces of this, but this happens consistently. Of course, the nurse practitioner, the social work, assess medications, do all, we have to have and then we have our students in all of here. We're all doing pieces of this. But can you do that consistently for every patient across the board? I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. I thought I was going to leave time for some questions, but now we're just going to have to run out the door.